What's up guys, Houndish here, and today I wanted to jump in and talk about Anthem and give you guys some of my actual thoughts about what we've seen of the game so far in the demo, as well as the content that I'm able to talk about from my time with the early game. I want to say this right now though, we are going to do some of this from the perspective of a Destiny player, so we'll touch on gameplay, endgame, rituals, and whether Anthem could be a fun game for Destiny fans. But this is an interesting conversation in itself. Naturally, some folks don't like the comparison between Destiny and Anthem, and I think that's pretty fair because Anthem and Destiny are two completely separate games. However, one of the reasons I want to do this is because EA are trying to sell Anthem to you right now. Of course, despite Destiny's issues on the whole, it's been pretty successful and it's kind of one of the reference looter shooters in the market right now, and it's survived with a live game for nearly 5 years. And to that end, one of the biggest markets or ecosystems that EA have tried to kind of tap into in terms of influence would be the Destiny community. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Look at your subfeed over the past couple of weeks. Me included, EA have had a lot of Destiny creators playing the game early, and they've been giving us a lot of juicy stuff to talk about. It's safe to say that they want us to be hyped. EA certainly anticipate that we are one of their biggest potential markets, and that's where I think it is fair to kind of make some comparisons between Anthem and Destiny, and I want to give you guys my fair kind of opinions and thoughts on the game so far, because Anthem at the moment, in its demo form, it does have some kind of big issues, and we will get to that, but we're also going to talk about loot, rewards, and what's looking good about Anthem, because there is a lot of stuff that Anthem has going for it, so I wanted to break that down for you guys. Firstly, let's speak about the demo. Of course, the VIP demo has just come to an end, and it's safe to say that it was pretty rough, or certain aspects of the demo at least were pretty rough. Of course, there were the initial connectivity issues with the game, and I think we should be fair about this. This is the first time that they've launched Anthem on all of these platforms with all of these people pouring in. Connectivity in the demo version right now has definitely improved, but there are still some issues, you know. Disconnects are happening relatively commonly. I've been playing mostly on Xbox, but I have seen disconnects on PC as well as Xbox. There are also some performance issues on PC, and some of these have been improved with different drivers. PC players will have another opportunity, of course, in the open demo this week, so we'll see how that goes. In terms of console performance though, because I haven't seen that many people talk about it, so I'm playing Xbox One X. Normally I would run that at 1440p. I found with Anthem that you would maybe get, 20, 25 FPS in the open world, or in the fort when you were running at higher resolution. So even on an Xbox One X, I've had to knock that down to 1080p to get, something around about 30 FPS. But as you'll probably notice in the gameplay, even running at 1080p, there will be some frame drop in the open world. So the experience is probably pretty similar on PlayStation as well. But for the console players, I just wanted to have that said, and once again, I don't know what kind of other optimizations may be in the full game. We'll have to wait and see. But now, let's speak about Anthem properly. What is it that's good about Anthem? Before we talk about concerns, and we will, we should absolutely recognize what Anthem has going for it. So in terms of gameplay, I think it feels pretty fantastic for a third-person game. There's loads of variety, and gameplay synergy between the different classes is pretty cool as well. It is distinctly different to the first-person experience, as some folks naturally will not like that as much. For me personally, I don't mind third-person games, but I find in Anthem that everything is mostly pretty polished, and having the freedom to fly around the open world, use that verticality in combat alongside your javelin abilities, weapons, ultimates, it's an almost completely unique part of Anthem, and I think BioWare in terms of the gameplay have done a pretty incredible job on that front. There's a little bit of gameplay depth as well. You've got all of your combos, elements, primers, and detonators, and these become increasingly important as you move into more of the endgame kind of content. And there's absolutely a little bit to learn there as well. Alongside the upgradability and customization, there's definitely a sense of kind of mastery or wanting to master a javelin or a certain combat scenario, and personally I've been pleasantly surprised by Anthem's gameplay. So what else feels good about Anthem? Well, I'd say that progression, of course this is a pretty huge part of the game, and loot upgrades and things like that feel pretty solid on the whole. You'll mostly be unlocking abilities for your javelin. There are different upgrade slots with a series of possibilities. Abilities for javelins in themselves act as loot, so just like weapons or component modifications that you're equipping, everything has a rarity and a power level. So you really are building a class with your kind of perfect abilities to get the best rarities with the best possible stat rolls or inscriptions, which are kind of like stat bonuses or perks on some of Destiny's weapons. It's safe to say that there is a lot of grind here if you want it. And on top of this, visual customization in the game is pretty fantastic. Lots of choice, many endgame ways of making visual upgrades, and there is going to be stuff that can be purchased, essentially microtransactions in the game at some point later on, but it will be purely cosmetic, and from what we know, there won't be any loot boxes involved, so anything you buy is direct purchase. Once again, microtransaction stuff, some people are kind of meh and don't really care, other people hate it, but it is safe to say that it is completely separate from the core gameplay of Anthem, So let me know your thoughts about that. But on the subject of visual content, Anthem is an incredible looking game. The world design, the scale and the way it's presented kind of speaks for itself really, and it maybe also could speak to some of the performance issues as well. It's certainly a hefty game. It's a very good looking game and a very ambitious game in general. But you do end up with a pretty fantastic world, and populating it with story and lore seems like a relatively easy thing for BioWare to do. Of course, dense story and world lore is something that they've always been pretty good at. But I personally have kind of ended up wanting to know more about the world. You know, what is the Anthem? Who are the Dominion? These are the questions that actually have some kind of level of depth in terms of story. So I feel like that stuff really helps to build a rich world. So these are just some of the best parts about Anthem right now. But let's also cover what isn't working so well and some things which concern me going forward. And this is where Destiny perhaps will be referenced a little bit more often, because I think for a lot of players it has set certain standards. So firstly, the general flow of Anthem. There is a lot that really works nicely, but there are some things which will get frustrating before too long in my opinion. Whenever you want to go and explore in Anthem, you'll need to launch an expedition. So you're in the fort, you head to your javelin or to matchmaking, and you can either jump in alone or matchmake for other players, which is a big plus by the way, BioWare. Matchmaking is pretty much there for everything in the game. But of course you have the option to fill the team with your friends if you like, but everything in the game works this way, and it can feel a little bit slow versus Destiny, where you could be in the tower, you bring up the map and jump straight to the EDZ, head over to an adventure or some flashpoints, do your thing, and then head back to the tower. While you're doing nearly the same thing in Anthem, it doesn't feel anywhere near as seamless for me personally, and you do end up being hit with some pretty lengthy load times on console and PC, regardless of spec. And of course, designing these systems is absolutely never easy, but I feel like in the long term, this will get pretty grating. This also extends to the open world, and it's probably the scale of the world and the architecture, but you hit a good few kind of immersion breaking loading zones in the wild. This isn't me trying to kind of harness hate against Anthem, but I feel like it's stuff that you guys should know about. Now, another somewhat fundamental flaw in the game, in my opinion, would be the Forge. The Forge is where you modify javelins, and in concept, and delivery in fact, it's pretty cool. However, you always need to be in the Forge in order to modify your javelin, or change weapons and so on. And so, if you're out in a stronghold for example, there's no swapping weapons because you want better DPS, and this extends to loot drops in the world. So when you get something dropped in the world, it'll tell you the rarity of the item, but that's all you're going to know until you get to the post-activity reward screen. So obviously some people will like this system more than others, and some people will find it more obnoxious than others. But to continue that scenario, you finish the stronghold, you head back to the hub, you check your loot and you modify your javelin accordingly, but again, there is no kind of holy crap moment out in the world where you see that you get this awesome masterwork item, you throw it on and then you try it out in free roam right in that instance. To make that ugly comparison to Destiny, in Destiny, you can do that. And I feel like despite the concept with the Forge, before long, that whole kind of process is going to get kind of tiring. And with the way it's designed, I don't know how easily they could ever change that. There is also another downside to this system, which is that in some cases, if you're disconnected in an activity, you could lose the loot that you're actually holding onto. Just to mention, there is some kind of reconnect mechanic in Anthem, and we found this in the demo. We'll have a player disconnect and they may have to restart their game or something, and ultimately they'll be able to reconnect before we finish that activity, but other times you will get completely disconnected and it is possible to lose rewards that you've already picked up. So that's definitely a frustration, and once again, I feel like it's something that you guys should know about. Otherwise though, loot drops in the world do feel pretty exciting. They have that sparkly loot on the ground, you pick them up, some lovely sound effects, everything's really glittery and you feel all hopeful, am I going to get something dope? Of course you'll find out later, but otherwise it feels pretty good in almost every way outside of what we've spoken about. And now let's speak about loot briefly. There's only one kind of major concern that I have with the loot, and I say this tentatively because we haven't seen everything in the game, but like many other looters, a lot of stuff in Anthem drops at all rarities, so you might get the Defender, and this is an assault rifle, and the weapon could drop at a common rarity, but at the other end of the game, you could also get a legendary or even higher rarity version of this weapon. So much of the loot table actually stacks pretty much the same way all the way up to the end game, but then of course higher rarity drops will have better stats, power, and descriptions, so they absolutely are better. But one thing which I think will need to happen is exclusive drops, things that are tied to or themed around certain content. Destiny exotic gear is really the comparison here. Some gear in a game like this needs absolute unique identity, and not to simply be a better version of something something that you had at level 10. I can't say that this absolutely doesn't happen in Anthem, but in general, I think there is massive value to having a 1k voices or a Barrett's chess piece from the Division, tucked away in some of the hardest content in the game. This one absolutely is not so much of a complaint, but more of a loot identity concern. However, the one thing that Anthem will do is unlock challenges for each weapon that you use. And ultimately, these challenges will allow you to unlock each tier of blueprint in order to craft a weapon. So you could have a rare scout rifle, but because you've unlocked that weapon, you can work towards unlocking an epic blueprint. You do this by completing challenges inside of the menu, and this was visible inside of the demo. And what it means is that you can upgrade that weapon to the next rarity, but you can also repeatedly recraft that weapon for different stats. So that's something that you can't do in Destiny, and whether or not a system like that would work in Destiny, I think it does suit Anthem, and that's one very solid, very well thought out progression system from what I can see. The final point that I would really list in terms of gameplay concern would be variety in the game and variety in the gameplay inside of the endgame especially. So from what I've seen and what we know about Anthem, it pretty much breaks down to missions that you do, the main campaign stuff, contracts, which are quests, and you can get these at different kind of levels throughout the game and the endgame, and then strongholds, which of course are kind of like miniature raids, sort of something between a strike and a raid in Destiny, but you always have very much that same format, and this kind of irks back to what I spoke about with the general flow of the game. You have 4 players, you launch an expedition, you can matchmake to find other players, which once again is fantastic, but things always tend to work in that same format. Now of course in Destiny, you do have PvP, which is completely different, 6 versus 6 or 4 versus 4, but in the PvE game, you can patrol with 3 players, you can patrol on your own, you can go into a lot of content with just 3 players, but you do also have additional variety with modes like Gambit, and then of course the raids. Having 6-player raids is a bunch of fun, and of course as well in Destiny, you have public events with multiple fire teams, and it really helps to give that sense that the world is alive, and you're running into other teams who are kind of off on their own objectives and their own missions. And Anthem doesn't quite have that kind of multiplayer world feel that Destiny does. Of course, I'm only speaking from a very early look at the game really, and naturally, if Anthem does what it's doing so far really well at launch and players enjoy it, then there is a bunch of room to expand on the game. So there we go guys, those would be my thoughts about Anthem on the whole right now. The stuff that works in the game, but also some stuff that's a little bit concerning, as well as some of the elements of the game which could absolutely be a turn on or a turn off, depending on the type of player that you are and the expectation that you have for a game like Anthem. And that's why I wanted to kind of look at it in this format guys, but of course if you haven't played yet, this weekend we get the open demo. 100% I think you guys should jump in and try it out. As I mentioned, Anthem has a lot going for it. I've really enjoyed what I've played of the game so far, despite having a few concerns. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about the game down below, guys. Let me know whether Anthem is something that you plan to try out this weekend in the open demo, or whether it's a game that you really just absolutely are already in love with and can't wait to play. While I've had a lot of fun with Anthem, I've tried to be fair about what I feel like are going to be issues for the game at some point. But I appreciate you guys listening. If you have a rating for this video, absolutely I'd love to see that down below, as well as any comments. But if you're new to the channel and you want to keep up to date with Anthem as well as Destiny content, I do plan to cover some Anthem as long as you guys are enjoying the game. So it's absolutely something we'll have to wait and see. But just to answer that question, I'm absolutely not going anywhere when it comes to Destiny content. That is what I absolutely love more than anything, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. But guys, I am now babbling. Have an awesome day, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you very soon.